Hey everybody, welcome to this quick tutorial where we're going to have a look at using node-based shading. So just a real quick intro to working with shaders and materials based off of nodes instead of using the good old shader tree. So this is going to be a quick look at it. We'll look at some of the functionality that we have, and in future tutorials we'll look at some more in-depth things and some other topics and some of the cool other kind of stuff that you can do with node-based shading and with nodes in general. But in this case, we're just going to kind of take a quick introduction, a little bit of a walkthrough here, and I've got this sample scene. It's a really simple scene with a basic sphere and then a kind of droplet shaped sphere and a replicator, pasting that all over the surface based off of a membrane texture. So I'll make this scene, both the beginning one and the finished one, available for download, so that you can grab those and you can have a look at them if you want to just jump right in and don't want to have to do any setups. So here I've got just the basic nodes already in here, and this is the material, which is part of the drop texture. So we can see there's the drop material group, there's material, which is material number 2, and I had just drug that into the graph editor. And then I've also put a couple of, well, 3 constants in here in the schematic view as well. And so we're going to start just by looking at how we can plug these into to get different results here. So let's start here. I'm just going to take the color on my, let's go to constant 1 here, and you can see it has a color value, and this works just like a constant in the shader tree. But if you look here in the shader tree, you'll see that it falls down here into the node section because it isn't existing within a predefined shader group or material group. It's actually only here inside of the schematic view. Now you could take it and move it around and drag it into other places, and that's one of the powerful things about the shader tree. But if you're working with it in the schematic view, there are some other kind of equally cool things, but different things that you can do with it to help you get more use out of your texture layers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this color here, which is that kind of burgundy color, and I'm going to plug it into my diffuse color. And instantly, very simple, my balls, my little spheres all change to that burgundy color, and that's great here. I'm going to set my shading over to fast for my preview render. That'll speed things up a little bit. And let's say, though, okay, let's say that works, but perhaps, here, let's go ahead and now my main material, I'm just going to turn my my specular color, which is also my reflection color, all the way up to white, so that we can see that a little bit better. So there you can see there's the white specularity on there. So what I could do is I could take that same color here, and I could plug this into specular color. And now you can see that the specular highlights are now, and the reflections are all being tinted with that burgundy color. Okay, that's fine. That's something you can do, and that can be very useful. Now, another thing that you can do is you can use math inside of here. And now, a lot of times when I first introduce this to students and people, the initial kind of knee-jerk reaction is, oh, I don't want to have to do math inside there. But really, it's really simple. And so let's look at actually how we're going to do that. So I'm going to add in a math node, and the one that I like to use a lot is the multiply node. And I find you can get a whole lot out of that. So I'm going to go up here into channel modifier and into math, and I'm going to go to basic math multiply, and it's going to drop this multiply node in here. So now, one just note, if you haven't really jumped into the schematic view at all, one thing to note is that whenever you see these kind of thick dotted lines, the dashed lines, that means that there's more than one input actually coming through there. In this case, it's an RGB input, so it's got a red, green, and blue channel coming through there. If I flip that open, you'll see that there it is. And if you're just driving a single value, so if I take like texture value and I plug it into somewhere here, you see it just gives us a single line. All right, so let's go ahead and unplug that. And what I want to do here is I want to take this and I want to plug this into my color. And you'll see what it's actually going to do is it's going to plug into just the red value. Okay, so if I want to see this go across RG and B, I could just duplicate this twice. That's actually what I'm going to do here just for now, so you can see everything broken out. And I'm going to plug this second one into the green, and I'm going to plug the third one into the blue. Okay, so now we have basically our RGB values coming through these multiply nodes, which now I'm actually going to go and take and plug right into red, green, and blue on the specular color. So now if you look here and you pay attention, you'll notice that the specular colors are now getting quite a bit darker. And that's because I have taken them and multiplied all of these incoming values instead of the values that we would need for RG and B to get this color. They're actually getting multiplied by 0, which means they're all going to black. Now if I change this up to 1, then you'll see we get back to that burgundy highlight. Now you can take this and you can overdrive it. I can multiply it by 3. And then it's going to increase them. You see we're going to end up with a bit lighter color. All right. And so this way you can take and you can modify anything that you have coming in, and you can send it out in a slightly different way. So, and there are some other ways that you can do this, but for now we'll just look at it here with these basic nodes. Okay, and actually I'm going to take all these and get rid of them because for the moment what I really want is just my color going into my diffuse color, and then also close up my specular and drop it into my specular color. Okay, so there we go, back to kind of where we were. But you do have that option. You can use some math nodes, and we're going to use some more math here in just a moment. So now I've got some other constants here. So I've got a constant with a green, I've got a constant with a blue color, and what I can do is I can at any point I can take any one of these. I can go down to the color coming out of any of these, and I can plug it in, and it's going to replace whatever is there inside of my diffuse color. So I mean, it's pretty simple stuff. And the nice thing is you can use this on multiple materials. So, you know, say if I had also, let's go and grab the material that goes with my the ball, kind of the underlying sphere there. I could also take this same one and I could plug it into the diffuse color. So in a lot of ways, this now is going to work like an instance, because I can take just this one here and I can make a change to it. Let's say make it a little bit lighter. And it's going to make it lighter not only in material 2, which is that drop material, but it's also going to make it lighter in that ball material. So this has the kind of the added power and flexibility that you can go different places in multiple locations with one node without having to have a bunch of instances running through your shader tree. So if you're going to be using something like this where you have one value or one constant that's going to drive a whole bunch of different things, you want to be able to change it very easily, then this is a good way to do it, because you don't have to keep creating instances upon instances of all of these constant layers and then having them all over the shader tree, and then have to fish around and find the master one. With this, you just go down, you take the node, you could rename the node, blue color, whatever, and then whenever you go in and make a change to that blue color, okay, now we're going to make it a little darker, then it goes and it updates across all of your surfaces. So let's look, though, at another thing that we can do here, and that is going to be to apply these 3 constants across all of these different spheres. Now, this is done with a replicator, so we could do something like a gradient, and this would work, but you have a really nice and powerful option here inside of the schematic view, and that's going to be to use a texture switch node. So I'm going to go in here to add, and let's go to shader nodes, and I want to choose a texture switch. Okay, so what the texture switch does is it lets you plug in any multitude of textures, and then it will choose either randomly, and its default is going to be based off of particle ID, and it will plug those into whatever kind of output you want to put it to. So I'm going to put all 3 of those in here. If you flip it down, you see that we actually have all of them going on here, and they're going to stack vertically. So the first one that you plug in is going to go in first. Oops, there we go. The second one will go on top of that, and the third one will go on top of that. So that's the order that they go in. They're going to always, as you put in a new one, it's going to go on the top of the stack. So just something to note. And so now if I take this, and let's take our texture color now, and I'm going to plug that into diffuse color on the material, you can see now that we get all of the kind of different colors going in across the spheres. Now in this case, it's using a particle ID. That's kind of the default. So if I take this same one here and plug it into specular color, you'll see that we get the different specular color matches up with, the diffuse color because it's using the same ID. All right, so let's take this kind of one step further here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add in another texture switch. So texture switch, I could also duplicate the one that was in there. But now what I'm going to do is I want to create a kind of a corresponding bump map with each one of these constant colors. So let's go ahead and I'm going to choose add, and I have the option here for doing shader nodes, and this is going to give you pretty much all of the things that you would get inside of the shader tree, but they'll just appear as nodes as opposed to appearing inside of the shader tree. So let's say I want to put in let's put in a noise one. I always like doing some noise, and then I'm going to add another one, which let's make a grid, and then one more, and we'll do dots. Yeah, that'll work. All right, so I'm just going to take these and I'm going to drop them right in. So I'm going to take this one, put it in here. I'm going to take this one and put it in here, and take this one and put it in there. Okay, so now I have all three of these different textures plugged into this texture switch. And then what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to take the texture value and I'm going to plug it into the bump. Now the bump doesn't appear here at first, so all you have to do is go over to channels, and you go down here and we find our bump. So let's go down here, and not our bump amplitude, but our bump value. There we go, and drag that in. Make sure you don't drag in bump amplitude because that does something different. That's the actual distance that the bump can go. So you got to go down and find bump value there. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, except I'm going to use texture value, and I'm going to plug it into bump value. So now if we zoom in here, we should see some bumps start to appear, except let's see, I may need to check my texture locators here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these texture locators and I'm going to set them all at the same time here. So let's see, all I have to do is just double click on this this little diamond here. It gives you your texture locator. If you just double click, it'll show things that are hidden. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all three of these so that I can edit them at the same time. And right now you see they're set to solid, but they're really big. So let's set them to like 0.01. And there we go. Now we start to see the bump starts to show up. And also the bump amplitude is a little on the crazy side. So let's go back to shading. And I'm going to go back to the material itself here, which is our drop. And I'm going to set the bump amplitude to something like maybe 0.5 millimeters, so that these are not so dense. And I changed my mind. Go to 1 millimeter. All right, so we're going to put that in there. And then you get, now we start to see this bump start to appear. It's fairly faint. And the one thing that I'm also going to do here is I'm going to go back to all of these texture locators. And you have the option here for choosing world coordinates. Now, if you don't choose world coordinates, what it's going to do is it's going to base the coordinates based on the initial item. So, our initial drop that's sitting here at the origin. Now, if I turn on world coordinates, it's going to spread them across space. And there you go. Now we start to see more of these show up, and we can actually see them a little bit better now. Because it's now taking place across the entire space instead of just kind of in one little area. So let's go down even smaller here. Let's go to maybe 2 millimeters so that these get nice and tight. There we go. So I got 2 millimeters, and since I have Fresnel on here, you see the edges start to light up. I like that. And you see, so all of our green ones have the noise. All of our burgundy ones have the grid, and all of our blue ones have the dots on them. So pretty easily you can take and set these things up so that so you get this nice kind of effect where you're getting a matching bump map that accompanies your actual texture switches, which is just doing the colors. Now I'm just basing these again off of the actual the particle ID. So at this point, this is all it's doing. It picks a particle number, randomly assigns it, and default it's going to use the same particle ID system. So you're always going to get all the green ones will have the same, all the burgundy will have the same, all the blue ones will have the same. All right. So let's look at then one more example of what we can do here. And for now, I'm going to go ahead and just unplug the bump because I'm going to kind of untie the textured colors here from the actual particles. And I want them to just be something that works on their own. Now, I may still want to work with these, so I'm going to grab all these and I'm just going to move them up and off to the side. Now, alternatively, what you could do is you could make a secondary material that actually, here, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and I'm going to make let's duplicate this material. And there we go. And then what I'm going to do is, let's see, I want to take material 3, which is on top, and I'm just going to take and plug in my texture value to my, oops, I don't have bump on that one here. So let's do this one. Since I already brought the bump up on this one, I don't want to have to take the time to go and dig it out on the other one. So let's take texture value and, oops, helps if I can see it. So let's take texture value here and I'm going to plug this into the bump and we'll leave that one. Okay. And then when we hide our material 3, which is on top, we'll kind of go back to this version. All right, but now I want to look at an alternate version here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and here I can actually get rid of this node here because I don't need it at the moment. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I want to drive it off of some other values. So in order to do that, you'll see that this texture switch node has an input value option. And to control that, I can go into shader inputs and I can choose a shader inputs node. Now, at first, the shader inputs node can be a little bit on the confusing and frustrating side because it doesn't come in with anything. There's no values. There's no little circles, so there's nothing that I can plug into this input value. But then when you select the node, it gets even better. There's nothing in the channels, so there's really nothing here. In order to add something into this to actually use and drive our input value, what we have to do is right-click here and choose Add Shader Input. And this is going to give you 4 different options. So we have surface normal, sample ray, sample position, and particle sample. So let's start here just with, I'm going to start with surface normal. I kind of like this one. So we'll just look at some of these. We won't look at all of them. We'll look at other ones in a future lesson here. But let's say I take my, my shading normal, and I'm going to plug that into my input value. And now what you'll see is that all of these spheres, or all the little droplets that are on the surface of this big sphere, will get this, this striation of these textures showing up. So, that's kind of cool. And it's going to be based on each individual one. And then you can do that. Okay. We could also choose to do geometric normal, which is going to be a more faceted version because it's going to show the individual polygons that make up this mesh instead of just the smooth mesh. And so we can do that. But then there's some other cool things that we can do here. And actually here, before I do this, I should mention with the texture switch here, if you go up in the options, you can see there's an interpolate option. And what that will do is it will actually blend between any of the textures that you have going in, except there is a little bit of an issue here. And you can see that we get this step where it goes from the last or the first one around to the last one where it wraps around. So we've got our burgundy color and then lower values than the burgundy color. It just jumps back to the blue. If you want to kind of cheat that, you can actually just take your last value that you have here, and I'm just going to take it here and I'm going to right click and duplicate it. And then I'll just bring it up here. And then I'm just going to plug this as a 4th node into my textures. And then you'll see that now we have basically it's wrapping. So we have this first value, the burgundy, and then it goes into the green, and then it goes into the blue, and then it goes back to the burgundy. That way I don't have to worry about any kind of step there in the middle, which is going to be important here in a moment because the next thing that we're going to look at, let's right click on this. And what I'm going to choose is Add Shader Input. And this one, we're going to do sample position. So sample position is really pretty cool here. So if we zoom this out here, if I take this and let's say I want to take my world position, I'm going to plug that in here. Now what we'll get is this this kind of cool quadrant version where it's taking the different colors and it's putting them in different areas based on their position in XYZ space. So that's kind of cool. And let's see, I'm going to right click here. And once again, I'm going to go down. Actually, here, let's move this up so I can see more. And add shader inputs. In this one, I'm going to use sample ray. Okay, so let's take this one. And one that I really like to use here, because it kind of illustrates what's going on here very easily. There are two I like, and it's ray direction and ray distance. So let's start by plugging ray direction into here. And now you'll see that we get this color, but as we rotate around, you'll see that we get these kind of fluxes of color where it's passing through depending on, it's based off of our shader angle and then the direction of the rays. So you get this kind of cool combined effect, and you end up with, really interesting stuff that's going to animate based on the position of the camera or based on the position of the object. And it's going to be mostly based off of the relative orientation of the faces of the individual replicator items as they correspond to the camera. So that's kind of cool. And then the last one that we'll look at here is ray distance. So let's take ray distance. I'm going to plug that in. And this one I also find to be cool because you can zoom in and out and you get these different colors as you zoom, which is pretty awesome. Now, sometimes you might find that you want something like this to happen, but you don't want it to be quite so, quite so fast. Maybe you want the color variations to come slower as this object moves towards you, or you move towards the object, or maybe you want it to go faster. So that's where we can go in and we can start using math again. So after we've started doing all this, we plugged all these different nodes in. Remember that you can always add in all sorts of things along the lines in the chain here. And so we're going to add in another math node. So I'm going to go, I have it in recent, and I'm going to add in a multiply. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this into my input value, and everything's going to get wonky for a second, but that's okay. And then I'm going to take my ray distance. I'm going to plug that in here, and everything's going to go to just a solid color for a moment, because remember, at default we had this this value b is set to 0, so we're multiplying it by 0. So we're basically just going back to our very first constant, because there are no other depths because it's being multiplied by 0. So if we take this and set it to 1, we'll get back to where we were, where we got blue in the front, and we start to see it fade to the burgundy and then the different colors. And then as we go back in and out, we get the same kind of effect. But if we take this and we drive this value, say down, let's put it down to something pretty small. Now you can see that the colors are going to spread more, and this is going to slow down the change in color based on distance, because it's taking, basically a default value of a meter, and instead of us changing those values over the course of 1 meter, we're multiplying that by 0.67. So now instead of, or 0.167. So now instead of over a meter, this is taking 8 meters for it to, or about 8 meters, 7, I guess, for it to cover the actual, space of these striated colors. If we go the other way, let's put it up to 5, we'll now start to see more repetition in here because the actual distance is less. So these are going to repeat 5 times now within a meter. So you can think of it kind of like UV maps, where if you add a higher number, it's going to mean more tightly packed. If you add a lower number, if you're multiplying your UV tiling, then it's going to, kind of spread things out more. So now if we move in, you can see that we get some pretty crazy stuff going on here. This could be a really cheap and easy way to animate, something that needs to flash, like a siren, or something that might need to flash colors, maybe some lights on an ambulance or something. You want to flash colors. Obviously, you don't want to go with quite the psychedelic colors, but I think it illustrates the point pretty well. But then you can have this set up so just as this moves, based on its distance, it's going to change colors, which can be a problem if you're doing something like a chase camera that won't change. But you could then change it to something like world position, and you're set and good to go again. So hopefully this gives you a good start at some of the kind of fun and interesting things you can do inside of the shader tree, or excuse me, not inside of the shader tree when you're working in the schematic view. And here we can go back. Let's go ahead and hide that. We go back to our first one, and there you can see there was our other version where now instead of just having a bunch of different colors applied to our spheres, and oops, let's go ahead and turn off my blending, my interpolate. Now instead of just the different colors, we have the different colors and a corresponding bump map that goes with them. And you can do this with anything else too. You could apply that, instead of bump, you could apply it to whatever else you like in here. Oops, let's see, make sure that those are all set. Yep. So there you go. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email, post a comment or a question, or you can also remember download the source file here. It's a pretty simple one with this one, but in other videos it'll be a little bit more complex, and you can dive in and get to work on your own using the schematic view inside of Modo. That does it for this one. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.